My most popular Risk of Rain 2 video is a pretty negative review of the Seekers of the Storm DLC. I criticize a lot of the bugs introduced with the patch and the clunkiness of a lot of the new content, but say that ultimately I think there's a lot of ideas here introduced in the expansion that are interesting at the least, and I still stand by this. Believe it or not, I really do like Risk of Rain 2. It's probably one of my favorite video games that I've played, and while I can still stand by a good chunk of what was said in my video, it does pain me that my biggest video on one of my favorite games is a fairly negative takedown of it and its content. So this is a little bit of retribution. After 8 months, Gearbox has gone through to address the issues with Seekers of the Storm and a lot of the bugs that were brought with it. So, now that the roadmap is through, what do I think? Seekers of the Storm 2.0, in a lot of ways, feels like an entirely different patch. I think Gearbox did a good job of sprucing up what worked with the original version of the expansion while ditching a lot of the less favorable aspects. Let's start with the new elites, which I think are some of the major sticking points for me after launch. Gilded elites now allow for you to get back gold stolen from you while also being less tanky, which is a great change in my opinion, but I think the best improvement is seen in the twisted elites. I and many others hated these elites on release. They were so stupid, I cannot believe they were allowed to launch in the way they were. Instead of damage being instantly reflected back towards you, it now charges up in a slow-moving, tracking projectile that you could destroy. While I think you still should target down these elites, they're not nearly as belligerent as they were before and now allow room for counterplay. Basically every item has been retouched as well, making them feel a lot better in the context of Risk of Rain. A chunk of these items still have a bit of that modded feel to them, but it's nowhere as prevalent as it was on release. My mild criticism of the changes are I feel that maybe Gearbox went a little too far in making sure all these items are impactful when I don't think they needed to. I think there should be bad items in Risk of Rain, in the sense that they're not as impactful as maybe they could be. Obviously, they should not make up a bulk of them, but I do feel like having bad items makes good items feel better. For example, I thought items like Antler Shield were totally fine. I didn't think it needed to get changed outside the numbers. I think it could have remained a worse version of Razor Wire. Is it better as elusive antlers? Yeah, but maybe a bit too much, and it does feel very much like a modded item with how it summons pickups on the map. In my opinion, it and maybe Bolstering Lantern should have been green items. In comparison, I feel like the new Breaching Fin probably could have remained a white item, seeing as I think its effects are relatively simpler. In my opinion, I think item rarity should have some effect on the complexity of them, but ultimately, that's just my opinion. I don't think this aspect of the items matter that much. My main concern just comes from updates later down the road. I'm a bit afraid that adding more of these kind of complex or situational items leads to complexity creep within even white items, which in my mind should be relatively simple. I also just want to mention Warbonds having a huge glow up. Again, I don't think they really need to change to this item. My opinion on bad items being necessary even extends to reds, though to a lesser extent. I think Warbonds could have just received a numbers change, but it has become one of my favorite items, so I can't really complain too much. This doesn't have an effect on the rest of the review, but I do want to mention that fully stacking 1 Warbonds will do 50% of the teleporter boss's max health, which is kind of ridiculous, and as far as I know in multiplayer, if you have 2 players with 1 Warbonds each at max stats, the Warbonds itself will kill the teleporter boss for you. All of this basically is to say that items feel better to use and fit better into the existing framework left by Hoppo. So, while not entirely necessary, I do feel like it is a welcome change. Now, probably what everybody was waiting for, the changes to the new survivors, and I have to say they did a pretty good job. All 3 of the new survivors play much better, particularly Chef, who before was one of the most baffling aspects of the original Seekers of the Storm DLC. He was incredibly undercooked, and he felt like a flailing husk rather than a playable character. He has huge improvements across the board to his base kit, as well as some new additional alternate moves. In fact, all the new survivors got some new alternate moves, which help flesh out their moveset, especially when compared to the previous characters. In fact, some of the newer survivors make the older ones feel a bit bland in comparison. Now that I've been able to play as them without a bunch of bugs and questionable design choices getting in the way, I can appreciate them a lot more than on launch, even without the changes. Before Seekers, I would say items have a bigger influence on the game than survivors do for the most part. There are obviously exceptions, and survivor picks do influence the feel of the game, but I would argue that items have a much greater impact on what you can and cannot do and enable certain playstyles to play. With the new survivors, I wouldn't exactly say that this is true anymore. While survivor pick always did influence what items you wanted to see and pick up throughout your run, I do think you feel this more with a lot of the DLC survivors, and this does include the survivors of the Void characters as well, and this can be things that are relatively simple. The fact that Railgunner has a reason to pick up more than 9 or 10 lens makers to increase damage is pretty interesting in comparison to the rest of the cast. This could also be seen in the False Sun, who actively wants to pick up growth items, something I think most other survivors don't really care for. Seeker, being a more support-oriented survivor, is a fun design and focuses more on the multiplayer aspect of the game that feels like other survivors completely ignore. Seekers of the Storm feels a lot better now, and is something I would say is actually worth its price tag. It includes some beautiful new stages, fun new items, a new boss fight, and interesting new characters. This version of Seekers has left me once again tentatively excited to see what is to come. The launch of the expansion was, to be honest, disastrous and not easily forgotten, but what has come from it has been very enjoyable. Credit where credit is due, Gearbox has done a good job of responding to player criticism in what I think is a fairly timely fashion. I cannot imagine basically remaking a majority of the content in your expansion was an easy feat. I'm not anticipating any new content to be even shown off, at least for a little while. See, holy fuck. Okay, so in the middle of writing this review, Gearbox showed off a new expansion. Apparently they flew out some raw content creators to do an early playtest of the expansion, and they seemed to say it was pretty good, and if they were to release the expansion as they experienced it, the community would receive it better than Seekers. But we don't have a release date yet. I'm fine if they take their time. After all, I don't think anyone wants to have another Seekers of the Storm launch, so for now, I will be patiently waiting to see what's to come next.